This has to be my favorite part of cooking, using the bounty that Mother Nature has provided because I know how important vegetables are to a healthy body. Again, there will be some fruits and vegetables I talk about that may not work for you because of a food sensitivity. But that's okay. Go with what you can have. Don't dwell on what you can't have. I love the summer when the farmers markets are in full swing in my area. The selection of fruits and vegetables, they're so bountiful and fresh. Nothing tastes as good as peaches or melons or tomatoes that are picked fresh from the garden. If you live in a warm climate where farmers markets run year-round, I sure envy you. Another reason I like to buy my produce at farmers markets, most are generally organically grown and free of pesticides. In the perfect world, it would be great if all the produce we consume could be organically grown. But I understand, depending on the area you live in, especially in the winter months, the availability of organic might be difficult to find and more expensive. If you are new to adding more fruits and vegetables to your meals and are unsure of which produce harbors the most pesticides and which ones are the cleanest, I have included a PDF download in the bonus section of the Environmental Working Group's Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen produce list. These can change from year to year. For example, apples used to top the list of the most contaminated produce, but the last couple of years, it's been beat out by strawberries. So how do you know which fruits and veggies in the grocery store are organic or not? Look at the number on the PLU code, which stands for Product Lookup Code. Organic produce has 5 digits and will begin with the number 9. Conventionally grown produce, where pesticides are used, have 4 numbers and begin with the number 4. If you see a label with 5 numbers that begin with the number 8, this code indicates the produce is genetically modified and definitely is not organic. These days, the big craze is spiralizing fruits and veggies, and for a good reason. It's healthier to use vegetables in place of grains and enables us to give our bodies the 5 to 7 plus servings of veggies daily, along with 2 servings of fruit our body needs to stay healthy. Spiralizing also adds an element of presentation that makes dishes look more appealing. There are so many vegetables as well as fruits that can be spiralized. When I think about spiralizing, zucchini and even cucumbers are the first 2 that come to mind. But actually, any fruit or vegetable can be spiralized as long as it's firm enough. Even beets, carrots, and sweet potatoes. Recently, I've started to see a variety of spiralized veggies showing up in our health food stores and grocery stores. The beets and carrots can be used raw, in salads, or cooked as noodles. Sweet potatoes can be made into unique oven-roasted fries that make them oh so appetizing. Spiralizers come in many shapes, sizes, and price range. Here are a few examples available on Amazon. A handheld for under $20 that can only do a basic function of spiralizing without various blade changes. A traditional spiralizer for bigger jobs and a variety of blade changes depending on the size and shape you want your noodles. And a heavy spiralizer attachment for equipment like a KitchenAid mixer. My spiralizer is similar to the middle picture, but mine is an early model and has 3 blade changes. I also have a small handheld one, like in the right-hand corner picture, which is okay for a quick spiralized item, but I mainly use the one with the blade changes. I find thinking outside the box when using fruits and vegetables in dishes can be fun and tasty. Don't you? I like being creative to see what I can think up to make vegetables to pull double duty. Zucchini is one of my favorites. I like to make zoodles, which is just zucchini in different forms. For example, I spiralize zucchini to look like noodles and use them as spaghetti. I also like to make lasagna where I cut the zucchini lengthwise, similar to the picture here, but using a mandolin, making them a little thicker. This makes for some tasty lasagna. And when I make it, of course, it's dairy-free. This is where I like to use Daiya mozzarella cheese substitute instead of the ricotta cheese for the filling. I use pureed avocado and sometimes dairy-free yogurt. Slicing the zucchinis thin, like in this picture, are great for making zucchini mock ravioli, where I will fill it again using a dairy-free substitute, a little pureed avocado with a small amount of meat, and then wrap them in little balls, covering with pasta sauce and baking. I also like to cut zucchini thin, like in this picture, to make a cold zucchini salad, which is very refreshing. Pizza boats, pizza sliders, they're all so simple. I like to make pizza boats on the grill. First, I cut the zucchini lengthwise, scoop a small portion in the middle, and then I brush it with olive oil on both sides and grill flesh side down first. Grilling gives such awesome flavor to zucchini. After a couple minutes on the hot grill, I turn the zucchini over and fill the cavity I made with a pasta sauce, topping with your special choices of little cheese and other toppings that make it so yummy-licious. For the sliders, I just cut the zucchini in thick circles, cover with pasta sauce, a few toppings and cheese substitute. Then I bake it to heat it through. Zucchini wraps are a tasty alternative to a grain wrap. They need to be eaten fairly soon after adding a filling so they don't get soggy. If you would happen to have extra zucchini wraps left over, store them flat in the fridge with parchment paper separating each one. I have to admit, the first time I made these, they didn't turn out at all. I took them out of the oven too soon, and when I went to peel them off the parchment paper, they were a pile of mush. But all was not lost. I put them in the fridge for later, and I mixed them in with my breakfast eggs. Just as a side note, the little square in the picture on the left-hand side on the plate, it's actually a piece of zucchini bread with homemade pumpkin seed butter left over from a cooking workshop I had my students make. It was very tasty. Pizza crust can also be made with zucchini with the ingredients similar to the wrap recipe. It just tends to get soggy quickly once you add toppings and it cools. Because zucchini has a high water content, one very important step when grating it is to let it set for 10 to 15 minutes, and during that time, I place it in a mesh bag and wring the juice out several times, or else your recipe will be very soggy. When making spaghetti or lasagna noodles, I don't wring them out, but I place them on a paper towel and let them sit approximately 10 to 15 minutes, and I blot them with additional paper towels. I even heat them for a couple of minutes in a skillet to help release more of the water content. You will notice when making lasagna with zucchini noodles, there will be extra liquid when it has finished baking, but you can easily spoon that off. I like to grow zucchini in my backyard during the summer. I don't have a very big area where the sun shines for enough hours in the day to have a large garden, so my plot tends to be pretty small with just a few select plants, but it's enough to produce an adequate supply for me. I like to start by buying my plants from a nursery with starters so they produce quicker than they do from seed. Cauliflower has become one of my recipe besties, and apparently it's caught the attention of many others as well. One of my beefs, though, about using cauliflower is the mess it tends to make and how expensive it can be when it's not in season. I have to say there are now a few companies who have jumped on the cauliflower train, and I can now find cauliflower rice in the frozen section and sometimes fresh in a bag in the produce department at a couple of my local grocers. This availability has me using more cauliflower in recipes for sure. I use the cauliflower rice in my casseroles as a rice substitute or as noodles for grain-free alternatives with so much more nutritive value. It's also great in stir-fries, and I like to make chili with it instead of using beans. To use it for pizza crust, I tend to make the rice a little finer than I would in my casseroles and stir fry. Cauliflower is another vegetable that you need to pay attention to the water content, especially when making pizza crust, pizza, and cheesy pizza breadsticks. I found it fascinating when I discovered I could use cauliflower for a white sauce by steaming it until soft, then pureeing it in a blender with spices and adding a dairy alternative. This broccoli cheese chicken casserole is made using cauliflower as the white sauce. The cauliflower could also be cooked in a small amount of bone broth and an onion added to give it extra flavor instead of steaming. Avocados have so many uses as well. I have made chocolate mousse, smoothies, sauces, salad dressings, lasagna filling, and toast topping. Butternut squash can easily be made into fries, spiralized noodles, casseroles, baked, mashed, pureed for sauces, and creamed for soups. Besides baked, sweet potatoes can be used in place of mashed potatoes, added to casseroles, baked as fries, in brownies, even pizza crust and flatbread. One of my favorite cool treats is freezing bananas and blending them to become ice cream. I've also mixed bananas with eggs to make flourless pancakes. It's great in smoothies. It's also great as a binder in cookies and made into desserts. Now, here's a great idea for a tasty pie crust without using any type of flour. Nuts and seeds can take your dessert crust to the next level. Use your favorite nuts or seeds or a combination of both, along with dried fruit for the stickability factor. It's the binder that makes the nuts stick together. Medjool dates are great for this and can be blended together to make a variety of dessert crust with nuts and seeds. Raisins, dried apricots, they both work well too. You may want to consider soaking the dried fruit in a little warm water first to make them more pliable. Then drain off the excess water before adding to the nuts or the seeds. And you can even jazz it up if you want by adding cacao powder, coconut flakes, and even spices like vanilla, cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger around the holidays. So you would add approximately 1 cup of nuts, seeds, or a combination of both to the blender. Then you would add a half to 1 cup of dried fruit of choice. Once blended, press into a greased 9-inch pan with your fingers. You may need to wet your fingers though to help make the dough press a little better, because it may be a little sticky, so a small spoon can also help with this to spread it around the sides. You may want to cover the exposed edges if you are baking it, as it tends to burn quickly. 2 natural sweeteners I use frequently are pure maple syrup and raw honey. I like to use them especially in my baking. The pure maple syrup, of course, is made from the sap of maple trees, and it's one of the oldest sweeteners consumed and used by early Native Americans. It's a little thinner in consistency than the pancake syrup you buy in the stores, but it makes up for it in taste and its high antioxidant content, which helps fight inflammation. It also contains vitamins and minerals. It has a lower glycemic value than sugar, which some diabetics can tolerate maple syrup in moderation. And when it comes to honey, all honey is not created equal. The majority of honey you buy in the grocery store has been heat pasteurized, which kills the important nutrients and may have sugar additives or high fructose corn syrup added as fillers to cut the cost. Raw honey comes straight from the hive, and it may be filtered or unfiltered, but it has not been heated, and it contains important antioxidants to help boost the immune system. Honey has so many uses. It helps to suppress coughs, it's used for healing wounds, it's used as a sleep aid, and even helps with allergies. It contains over 18 amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. A tablespoon ranks only around 10 on a glycemic index scale, which makes it a better choice for diabetics. Honey will keep for a very long time, but if it begins to crystallize, place the honey container in a small saucepan, adding a small amount of water to the pan over low heat until the honey begins to liquefy. Honey will lose many of its immune-boosting qualities if it's heated over 95 degrees. But overall, it is still healthier even in baking instead of using sugar. To substitute in place of granulated sugar, use 3/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of honey in place of 1 cup and reduce the liquid ingredients by 2 tablespoons to 1/4 cup. Most recipes I bake with already utilize maple syrup or honey. I generally don't adjust my oven temperature down either. If you decide to do some sugar swapping for honey, it may just take a little trial and error on your part. When I make my coconut pancakes, I use honey the majority of the time as the sweetener, starting out with a small amount, tasting the batter, and adjusting with more as needed. In addition to baked goods, honey and maple syrup are both good substitutes on oatmeal and in pudding, homemade whipped toppings, cake frosting, and other non-baked goods. Another rich sweetener I admit I generally only use around Thanksgiving or the Christmas holiday is blackstrap molasses. This natural sweetener is liquid and a byproduct of sugar that still contains healthy minerals before they have been extracted. It has an extremely strong taste and works well with pumpkin-flavored baked goods, oats, or spices. I find it best to use this in combination with either maple syrup or honey. It will also cause your baked goods to darken a lot quicker than using other types of sweeteners. Well, if you're not much into the liquid sweetener scene and you'd like to stick with something more along the lines of sugar so you don't have to make those recipe adjustments, then coconut sugar just might be the option for you. Its brown coloring and smell will remind you just like brown sugar, but it's a lot better for you. And coconut sugar is made from the sap of coconut flowers. It makes a great cup-for-cup substitution with sugar, and it has a great taste. Just keep in mind your light-colored recipes will tend to take a brownish tint. Coconut does contain vitamins B and C along with minerals. I especially like to use coconut sugar when making baked cookies. Stevia sweetener is a sweetener I use sparingly because it can be up to 300 times sweeter than sugar. I grew stevia in my yard a couple of years, but I didn't like the taste of it raw as well as I do the Liquid Sweet Leaf brand. Raw stevia is just the green leaves ground up, which can be found in some health food stores. I don't use a lot of stevia in my baked goods, but I do use the liquid stevia mainly for hot and cold drinks, smoothies, and desserts. It doesn't work well though if you're making candies and caramels because it doesn't melt like regular granular sugar. A little stevia goes a long way too. Some people feel stevia has a bitter aftertaste, but it's a matter of taste preference and brand. Most powdered stevia brands on the market contain fillers to cut some of the taste and make it a cheaper product, which means the sweetness can vary between the brands. Stevia measures 0 on the glycemic index scale, and it's a great sweetener for diabetics. The conversion when using stevia in place of sugar in recipes will vary depending on the brand, but here's a general substitution guideline. 1 cup of sugar equals 1 teaspoon of stevia powder or liquid concentrate. 1 tablespoon of sugar equals 1/4 teaspoon of stevia powder or 6 to 9 drops of concentrate. 1 teaspoon of sugar is 1/16 teaspoon of stevia powder or 2 to 4 drops of liquid concentrate. These are actual pictures of dishes I have made using ingredients provided by nature that I have talked about in this lesson. The cauliflower stir fry contains rice, broccoli, chicken, and coconut aminos instead of soy sauce, but the possibilities are endless when you use your favorite veggies. On the top right, the zucchini wraps are made with shredded zucchini, flaxseed meal, garlic powder, and salt. Cheese substitution and egg were used for binders. The bottom left picture of the dessert pizza was quite fun. I had an idea of what I wanted, but wasn't sure if I could make it turn out, but I was pretty pleased with it, and it had a great taste. It wasn't overly sweet either. I started with an easy crust made from raw quinoa that I had soaked overnight, then blended it with a little water and honey for sweetness and baked it. You could also use a frozen pre-made pizza crust that's gluten-free, and it will work just as well. The chocolate pizza is a pureed avocado sweetened with maple syrup, or you could use honey, a small amount of coconut milk, and raw cacao powder. Toppings are just strawberries and bananas. In the bottom right picture, it's a butternut squash with olive oil baked into fries. So do I have you thinking about all the endless possibilities of foods you thought you might not be able to eat again because you didn't think outside the box for ingredient substitutions that could possibly help save your recipes? Or maybe even create new ones? Do I have you hungry yet? Good! Let's move on to lesson 4.